What's up, everyone? It's your boy Nick P, the guy with the beard. And thank you so much for tuning into another episode of Black Voices Matter. Wow, we have been on a journey. It hasn't been a long journey, but still a journey nonetheless. But I am privileged to have family with me today. I have my sister, my Gamma sister, Mashaki McKenzie. We like to call her Mo. You all know Rev Kev. He is the co-host with me, co-facilitator with me on the How to Be an Anti-Racist Book Club. And we also have a special guest with us this evening, none other than Miss Danielle Littlefield. So tonight we're going to have so much to talk about. But first, I would just want to know how y'all doing.
All right. Hi, everyone.
Doing good, excited.
Ready to get meet and greet of this conversation.
I saw y'all been sharing and everything on Facebook, so I can't wait to hear what all we're going to talk about and what all y'all have to share. But in case you're out there, we want you to know that you are welcome to join in the conversation. Please feel free to hit that like button, to hit that share button. Feel free to share your comments. There's no comment that is wrong, that is too crazy. We want you to know that all your comments have a voice here, pun intended. So please let us know where you're from. Also, let us know how you feel about the subject matter. But tonight, we are going to talk about probably a classic in Black cinema, none other than Baby Boy, the video or the movie that so many of us have referenced over the years. And also we're going to have a conversation a little bit about toxic masculinity. But first, let's delve into one of our favorites in Black culture, which is Baby Boy. So what do y'all like most about the film? What do y'all remember and like most about the film?
Let's see who wants to jump in first.
Well, I can go with something like the thing I remember about this is this film was always being played on BET or Bounce TV. Like this was one of those things that you saw so many times that you were doing things like seeing the background and you got to see everything about the movie because it was always on.
Facts. It was definitely one that was always on rotation.
I think what I love the most, probably after the first few times I saw it, the first 3 or 4, not after the 100th millionth time, was Taraji P Henson. I mean, just straight up, I remember walking away from the movie and just always thinking about Taraji P Henson, kind of who she was going to be. Like, I knew she was going to be an actress I would see again because she was just so dynamic in the movie. I just always remember her.
Absolutely. I've always wondered, like, if they even had, like, a hint of how much their career would take off.
Yeah.
Like, as artists, you always wonder if this is it, if this is the project that's going to be, the one that skyrockets their career. But I wonder what was going on through their minds.
So the piece that I remember is Snoop Dogg, and I don't know why. I think it was his music. His music was already influential before the movie came out, and so I just remember Snoop Dogg, and then the dynamics of the relationships. I'm like, it just stuck with me. It just stuck with me. So that's what it stuck with me. Yeah.
Snoop Dogg had on a white beater in that movie. And correct. We got to see how skinny Snoop Dogg actually was.
And we were all shocked. I think
we cannot unsee that. It was hard to, like, imagine that Snoop, that's the OG right there. But when you saw him in that white beater, it was like, he a gangster. Well, yeah, he's a gangster, but come on, it's like you can't unsee that.
I remember how pretty his curls were. They were shiny. They was bouncing when he was running away. When they chased him down, I was like, "What beautiful hair!"
Facts, facts. I one thing that I guess always I never forgot was the relationship that Jody and Mel had. Their tumultuous relationship that they had in the beginning, and how it just reminds me a lot of the so I had a stepdad. I grew up with my stepdad, and just how sometimes those bonds between stepchild, or not literally a stepchild because they weren't married, but it's kind of like a adopted type of circumstance, and how those relationships can just be rocky. And I kind of laughed when I saw that because it kind of hit home for me to see, the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
That was probably one of my most memorable experiences about the movie.
So this movie comes out in like what 2001.
2001.
So it came out in 2001.
Yeah.
Do you like remember like your perspective of first seeing like seeing the movie for the first couple times and then watching it now as an adult that it has experienced some things, and like the difference between what it was when you first started watching it and then going back and rewatching the film? What was that like for you all?
Man, watching it, so 2001, I was middle school, eighth grade to be exact. And so when I watched it, when I didn't supposed to be watching it, because it's a rated R movie. Uh, so watching it then versus watching it as an adult, it still goes back to the relationships, because as a kid, I think I idolized the relationship between Tyrese and Taraji. I thought that was the best relationship, or I thought that was like the ideal relationship. But now, as an adult, I'm running away. I'm running the opposite way if I see something like that. And so it's like the different perspective on the very thing that I loved about the movie. It absolutely just changed with age.
Yeah.
I guess for me, looking back at it, it was looking back at it for me would be it. I don't really take that so seriously. Like, I don't take it as seriously as I did back then. Like, back then I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that Jody is this, immature, and then I felt like, I hope I don't ever be in a circumstance where I'm talking to my mama this way in her own house. And, um, but now I look back and I kind of laugh because, I've been in a circumstance where I had to live back with my mom for a little while. And I feel more humbled now than when I first saw it. Like, thinking when I first saw it, I'll never be in a circumstance like that. I'm going to always be, completely dependent. But being grown and have experienced things and having to have lived back with my mom and, experience that, I kind of just, I laugh at it now. I have like a kind of like I've been there. I can understand that type of response to it.
I think mine worked the opposite way. I think when I was younger, when this movie came out, I was in college. So, I'm going to just go ahead and tell my age by making that remark. I was, I think, a sophomore in college. I was probably 20 or almost 20 when this movie came out. And I think then at the time I thought it was funny. I remember just me and my sisters always, the different lines from the movie that we thought were funny. $40, we gonna laugh at $40. I'm gonna cook, I'm gonna clean, I'm gonna make the tacos, like all that. It was funny. And because that's what we do. And I remember thinking a lot of it was funny, and also like, that's so accurate. That's totally a character I know. Like, I know that kind of guy. But now, as a woman that's 38 with 2 children, I think now watching it, my experience of like, whoa, this is such a problem, right? Is that I had kind of a much more, not a quite a serious reaction to it, because the movie is so filled with like that natural comedy of life. And I think the music adds so much to the film, but just seeing the different complex levels on which this person really is, like really has such a strong refusal to be not only an adult, right? I'm just going to say adult as opposed to a man, especially because I know we're going to get into talking about toxic masculinity, but the real refusal, even I think about like the opening scene in the first four scenes, you really see him go from woman to woman of all these kind of different women that he's depending on for everything he needs. Like we open with the abortion clinic, and then he's at the house of Taraji P Henson's character, and then he goes to the other baby mama's house, and then he leaves her house and he goes to his mama's house, right? And he just kind of like goes from place to place where these different women are to get everything he needs. And that alone, I was like, whoa, I did not read it in that way. You know what I mean? I wasn't reading it with a critical eye. It was a good movie, and I got the nuance and the just kind of beauty of the storytelling, but it just operates on a lot more complex levels, I think, for me when I've watched it as an adult woman with children, definitely.
Yeah, and then when I think about that movie, like watching it, and I would have been like in middle school too, right? Like, so watching this when I'm not supposed to be watching it, I think watching that film, it kind of like life imitates art to a degree. And what I mean by that is watching this as a young person, Tyrese is still old enough in the movie to where you still looking up to this person. Like, this is big cousin age. So he got all the girls, he got this, like, so it wasn't just a shameful thing. He was still working on it. And then by the end of the movie, he gets it to quote unquote together to a degree, but then the movie's over. Right. So now watching it as an adult, the problem is if you think that this is cool when there's more than just this box of, and then they were successful and happy and had a family after this, it's like, well, what about when you grow up and you're in that space? Like, it's not just the box that says this is the end of the film and you continue to carry out those same type of traits. And so it's like, but as a kid watching it, it was like, oh, this is like, so like you said, you can identify different characters that you have been or that somebody like, and it's just like, oh, I see this and this is entertaining, but this is giving me some type of perspective. You feel kind of cool, but you don't see the results of that. And then we like, as an adult, it's like, okay, so if I live into this could be the harmful results of that. And this is why I need to not just be entertained by it, but understand it, because this art is giving us this end to how we can not just be entertained, but address some communal issues.
What was y'all's favorite line in the movie? Like, what line? Because the whole movie is classic, but what line is probably, probably had you rolling or had you in tears?
So many.
I feel like I already said a couple of mine.
Right.
Well, one with Snoop Dogg in his fort. Let's just break the ice with that one. When he kicks down the little kid's fort and like, forget your fort. Like, oh yeah. If you've ever babysat kids for a little while, that Snoop Dogg might have crossed your mind. No. I Hate You, Jody is another classic line. And then I think calling women female, that came from this movie, like heavy, like when you're like, no, you got to call women female. Like that we can blame this movie for that, because people started doing that because they thought that they were wise after that. Like when he's having the conversation with Peanut after in the back, and he's like, no, emotional creatures.
Mm-hmm. He ain't gonna say the other word.
Baby boy. See, this is why you shouldn't watch it when you're a kid. Parental discretion is advised.
Okay. I feel like I was hearing the word female pretty often before the movie, but then it's an age thing, right? Because, yeah, I was about the age that these people were supposed to be in the film when the film came out, right? They were supposed to be in their kind of early 20s, and I was
Right.
about 20 years old. So I was pretty used to the to that kind of explanation that he gave. It was like, oh, I know this dude. And I think that was the experience for somebody my age. You were like, oh, I know this person. I know both these young men. I know them. They are exactly these characters that we're looking at.
I don't know if I have a favorite line or a line that I remember, but I just remember a scene that comes to mind is when she kicked him out, or when he left, or after the big fight with Jodie Mama boyfriend. What was his name? Oh man, what was his name?
Melvin, yeah.
Melvin. That scene is what comes to mind, because you grown, get out. But he was like, "How dare you, mom?" So that part is what kind of comes to mind when I think about it as well.
Yeah, I remember the guns and butter line.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Can somebody do it? You gotta do it. If you go and bring up the line, you gotta do the line.
I nominate you, Kosh, too.
Yeah, I think you could do it.
Guns and butter.
I nominate you.
Nailed it. You nailed it. You nailed it.
Good.
I can't even think of. I don't even know which one would be my favorite. Like the whole thing was like I think every line was a lesson, because every line, either you were laughing at it because it resonated with truth. Like you said, art. I can't remember how you said it, Kev. You said art speaks life or truth, or art coming to life.
Art.
What was that?
Yeah, art imitating life.
Yes, absolutely. Art imitating life. And so it resonates with us, with our truth as Black people. Either that's your truth, or you can relate. You know someone, or you've been in that experience, or you can relate to that somewhere, and some way, somewhere in that movie. But also, if you weren't laughing, every moment was teaching you something, even if it was something not to be. And recently we have this this buzzword that has caused so much controversy, especially with in the Black community, when we talk about toxic masculinity, because you have so many derivatives of what that means. It has meant so many things for so many people, but when y'all hear toxic masculinity, I guess we can start with you, Danielle, since you're our guest. When you hear the term toxic masculinity, what comes to mind? How do you define that?
I define toxic masculinity as masculinity that is harmful to those around you, right? I think if your idea of masculinity, or the extremity kind of what you think masculinity to be, causes harm to the people in your life, it's kind of the definition of toxic, right? That it is not only bad for you, but in general harms those around you, right? That it makes you a danger. It makes you a danger to others. That is how I would define toxic masculinity, right? There's a type of masculinity that can be helpful, that can be protective, or that can be right honorable, or whatever it is. But once something becomes a danger to you and those around you, then it becomes toxic.
That was good. What do y'all think? What comes to mind when you hear toxic masculinity?
Gender neutral, because a lot of times we say masculine. I pronounced that wrong. We assign that to men, but we know that women can also, we knew that we come from a man and woman, right? So we have both. We have both. We have feminine and masculine, right? And so some women can be more aggressive, or be some women and or men can be less. So when I think about it, it's been overly aggressive about any subject. You can be in a professional setting, and the person is really aggressive about the subject, but not passionate, but aggressive. Sometimes we can get passionate and aggressive mixed up. And so for me, I agree with our guest that if is given, I think it's important to have some, but I think it's important to be balanced. And if you are in a space and you're making everybody uncomfortable, or you making everybody feel less than because of your aggressiveness, male or female, I believe that that's a problem that we need to address. Period.
Yeah, and like what comes to mind when I think about toxic masculinity, off the top of my mind, I think about being emotionally repressive, rigid, uninformed, and closed-minded. Like, so off the top of my mind, those things, and then with those things manifested mean various things. Like, so if I'm uninformed and closed-minded, then I'm making policies that are harming other people because I'm uninformed and closed-minded, but I'm a man and you can't tell me, or you know what I'm saying, type of thing. And so I think when I think about toxic masculinity, this is one of those difficult conversations, because we do like it's a buzz type of conversation now, but we don't like set the terms for like definitions for what we're talking about, what, because it can be so many different things. So I think Littlefield kind of hits it on the head when she talks about it's hurting you and it's hurting others, and that's why we need to kind of address this. So when we talk about toxic masculinity, it's centered around the cultural norms that shape toxic masculinity that are harmful to yourself or to others. And so, like, traditionally, when we think about toxic masculinity, we're talking about misogyny and we're talking about homophobia. Like, those are things that, like, literally are harmful. And like, when we think about it, breaking it down in parts, we think about the violence that comes because of toxic masculinity, the sexual assault that comes because of toxic masculinity. And yeah, you thought she was cute in the club, but you smacking her butt without her consent, that's still assault. Like, in some of our favorite songs, let's just put it out there, you know, like, who's gonna do that? Sexual assault, and then domestic violence. These are the traditional things of toxic masculinity that affect not just ourselves, but the other, most importantly, in this. But then toxic masculinity, there's this misguided sense of self-reliance. So we don't know how to ask for help. And then there's this emotional repression that leads to increased stress, depression, and substance abuse. So like, it's not just the external expression of toxic masculinity, but this inner thing that we feel like we can't talk about or express. Like, we're just going to be strong and you can deal with it. And having that understanding and then watching this film again, it totally kind of like shapes like, okay, I couldn't understand how this could have been a coming of age story until I started realizing like, oh, bro needs to grow up in this film, you know?
Can I add to your list just I think entitlement is, I feel like, a big part of like the essential problem with these ideas about masculinity, and you can absolutely see that in the film, right? Is that this kind of young man kind of isn't responsible to take care of himself or others, but he feels a real sense of entitlement to the women around him. He feels entitled to the children that he's not really taking care of. He feels entitled to his mother. He feels like he has like he deserves to be able to control all of these things around him, even though he doesn't do the things it takes to support any of these things. He seems kind of right. He feels entitled to them all. And so you get this kind of acting out with violence and aggression when that person isn't given something that they feel entitled to, i.e. sex or control over women's bodies or control over children that women are taking care of, right? Or their possessions, i.e. their cars. The car is such a major thing for me in that movie, right? That he's constantly taking her car, because to take away her car is to take away her agency, her ability to move, her ability to travel, to take care of herself, to not need him. And that's kind of the pivotal scene after he hits her, after the violence, right? Is when she finally takes her wheels back, right? She's like, okay, she came and picked up her car. But the sense of entitlement, I think, is such a huge part of it, because that is one of, I think, the major components of masculinity, is that men are entitled to take. This idea that men have a right to take because they are entitled to possess, right? To possess women and other things.
That's another classic line alert. I stole my car, Jody.
Right. Right.
So I noticed there's a common thread with a lot of the comments that you all have shared, which is very telling. But what I often hear when we talk about masculinity, what you highlighted, Rev Kev, is definitions. What I often hear is people may say masculinity is not toxic. So if we could take a step back, I want to ask you all, when you say toxic masculinity is harmful, define harm. What are you seeing as harm?
I think one, if it's actually doing physical harm to somebody, they're like if it's actually doing physical harm, like that's one thing. Like, so when we look at domestic violence, sexual assault, and even hate crimes, that is like physical violence. That's toxic. That's harmful. Like Littlefield was talking about with agency. If you have the privilege, because we live in a patriarchal society, you have the privilege to take somebody else's agency, and you don't feel the need to be ethical about that. Like a lot of times they say, when you're full of privilege, when you're not hungry for justice, that's because you're full of privilege. And when we're taking somebody's agency away because we have the rules set up for us, that is also toxic. Yeah, like so when I think about harm, I'm thinking about physical harm, and then taking someone's agency, and then using Ibram X Kendi notes, like if it's creating policies that restrict and harm other people, then that is also toxic. My rights should not infringe upon your rights. We can have different preferences, but my right should not infringe on yours.
What comes to mind for me is exactly what Rev Kevin said, but what also comes to mind is verbal toxic masculinity. Like that you can be verbally, you might not even put your hands on anybody, but everything you're saying is really aggressive and being rude, or being downful for the person, or making sure that you say things to keep that person in a place. That's when I believe that that it becomes toxic. Where I think it's important to have masculinity, and I think it's very, very important for men and women, especially our men, to walk in that correctly, and women too, to walk in that correctly. But we can use our words to be toxic in that way and be aggressive in that way. So when I think about it too, the word aggressive, if you've not noticed, I've said it like 10 times. To me, it means being overly power, or to trying to take the power away from someone with your words.
I would say, for me, because Danielle, you what you said was it inspired some ideas too. And yet all you all, feel welcome to. If y'all have questions too, I want you to, because I know I had some questions, and I know this movie and this topic is just full. It inspires a lot of questions. So I just want to make sure even audience members, If you have some questions, feel free to ask. I want to make sure I put that out there. But Danielle, you did say when you were talking about harm, what I think that it's very problematic when we don't, when we miss what you said by not defining harm, because I think that so many, when we're saying masculinity, we usually, oftentimes we do think men, and we define what is healthy to be a man, and sometimes I think some of that is harmful. I think it's harmful whenever we restrict our definition of manhood or masculinity in such a way that it doesn't give room for other people to define it for themselves. I think that we have to give room for human diversity and the diversity of personhoods all over the globe. You have different contexts. People have different contexts, different lived circumstances, and people's personhood should human personhood is just as diverse as humanity itself. And so I think when we use one rigid definition to define manhood, I think that's toxic, because what that does is that limits all of these people to have to fit into this rigid definition. And then men are constantly having to deny their truth, deny or work so hard to fit into this narrative that they have to have enough sexual exploits. They have to have enough money. They have to have the job. They have to look like they have it all together. It's so many definitions that we create, or so many ways that we restrict men to become a man by creating a rigid definition of masculinity, as opposed to letting people define it for themselves. I think it's harmful whenever we say that you're not a man unless, and we kind of, if it has nothing to do with love, peace, harmony, character, when we kind of deviate from those foundational principles and define it by, you have to have a certain amount of money, you have to love a certain way, you have to appear to be in control of every circumstance that you're in. When we deviate from that standard of just foundational character, I think that becomes harmful.
I just want to add to that list. I think often when we talk about harm, especially, and this comes up in the movie often, we think about active harm, right, such as violence or abusive language, but we don't often think about neglect and being inactive as a form of harm. And a lot of what you see with Jody and Baby Boy, right? There's even a line where she tells the friend on the phone, "Oh, Jody would never hit me. He ain't never hit me. He ain't crazy." And then that's all the kind of lead up to this climax in the movie where he does finally hit her, because this kind of avoidance, because what you see with Jody is a way in which because he doesn't want to do certain things, right? He doesn't want to kill anybody. He doesn't want to be a killer. He repeats that often when he's talking about the mother's boyfriends. Is he going to be a killer like Henry? He says that line 4 or 5 times throughout the movie. And you see his best friend is kind of very violent and very angry and kind of verbally abusive. And he's not that. So he takes a sort of pride in this idea that he is not actively harmful, yet he does harm, because he's neglectful and he's not actually doing anything in the direction of what he does need to do to take care of those around him. He avoids responsibility. He doesn't really make any real decisions. He leaves all the decisions up to the women in his life. His mother is taking care of one household and making all the decisions there. His first baby mom is taking care of the house with her children, and he refuses to move in with her so she can make all the decisions there and keep that up. He has another one that's living with her mother, and he stops by there. So this sort of extreme neglect and inactivity, the kind of refusal to do anything, to make any choice, is also a form is also harmful. It's also harm. I've often said when I've had this conversation with friends, right? Like if I don't feed my child, the state can still come pick them up, right? It's abusive for me not to feed them too. Not only if I smack them, it's also going to be a problem if I just don't feed them and I don't take care of them. So I think sometimes I hear men talk, and I hear a lot of guys who are kind of, and I'm using these quotes on purpose, like nice guys that take a sort of pride in not being violent and not cursing women out and not sleeping with tons of women, but they still aren't really doing anything they necessarily need to do. And neglect is extremely harmful.
I agree because I remember growing up, my grandmother's husband, he was very distant. So a lot of the male figures that I had in my life were they were they contributed in very interesting and unique ways. I'll say it that way. And my grandmother's husband, who was my grandfather by marriage, he was very distant. He never was physically, verbally abusive to either one of us. But I just remember the coldness. Sometimes we would be in the car and we may go on a trip for like an hour, and we literally would say not even one word to each other. It would be dead silent. And I just remember growing up as a little boy, and I was thinking, I do not want to be like that. That's not what I want to be like. I want to be able to have a conversation with another human being. And I think that sometimes we accredit not opening up as being masculine. And it's actually harmful, just like how you said, Danielle, to neglect, not of course your children, and neglecting your role and contributing to your family, but also humanity. Not being willing to talk to the person on the bus with you, or talk to somebody who's different. Just that avoidance, and neglect of contributing to positivity and the exchange of love and positivity from human being to human being. I think that neglect is harmful. I think it's absolutely harmful.
I want to bring some Andre 3000 in here. Like, so in his song, T.I. has a song called Sorry, and Andre 3000 is featured on it. And in his verse, in Andre's verse, he has a line that says, "And I probably would do it different if second the chance, if I would have had a cool older man tell me this in advance." And like how I relate that to this movie is, a lot of times we're watching it, and even now we're given these critiques. But if we are the ones who display toxic masculinity, can we identify that, speak to it, and then actually get the help that we need? You know what I'm saying? Because that's something that young men, I know that we deal with, like understanding your passion and understanding your aggression and somebody nurturing you through that. But just because you were being nurtured or you didn't have this, that doesn't mean that you are allowed to harm somebody. And even in your growth, you have to acknowledge that you've harmed somebody. Rev Kev, even in your growth, you probably harm people. You have harmed people. But thank God, that you had people around you that could reel you in and show you this. And what about those young men who turn to men who don't have that, and then this cycle gets perpetuated, and it's not this reflective thing that we're breaking down. And having this conversation is important because we're setting this up around the film Baby Boy, but we see this happen in those sacred spots of black society too. So we see it happen in the church. Boys will be boys. Come on, let's talk about it. and then women still go through the sexual assault, but we can't say anything because this is a sacred space. Or we see this happen in the academy, where women, their minds aren't respected, their gifts aren't respected the same way, but we can't really say anything because we don't have many institutions like this, and this is also a sacred space, so that voice gets repressed. And one of the hurtful things about toxic masculinity is this repression of truth, this repression of emotions, and now people can't speak to it because this is a sacred spot. And so this film, as we watch it, we get to see a lot of that, like we're talking about it now. And then how John Singleton, he also wanted Pac in this film, but Tupac had already died. And so you see Tupac in a lot of these different things, but when you look at the life of Tupac, and that's one of my guys, hip hop legends, right? But that life of Tupac was also like this coming of age too. Like, you're this revolutionary man that everybody is respecting you, but there's a lot of growing up that needs to take place too, because you're causing a lot of harm, and you're getting not only yourself in trouble, but you're harming other people externally as well. And so this film encapsulates all that. But what good is it if we're not able to actually go into our settings and speak truth to power?
So it was one thing that you said when it calls my remembrance. It brought back to my remembrance when you said repression of truth, or repression of voice, or just a silencing. You said something earlier. You talked about, Rev Kev, about being strong, and you talked about strength. We oftentimes, we men and women, we want to maintain an image of strength. And how can you define strength? Because we often want to say, I gotta be strong, be strong, be strong. I don't know if y'all seen that movie, Snow in the Bluff. But that was a movie that we yeah. Parental discretion is advised. Now, listen to me now. Parental discretion is advised. However, that was a movie that we watched. That I watched with my pastoral care and counseling lens. And I was watching it through the lens of, if I was to be a pastor, not just a senior pastor, but pastoral in any context, whether it be youth pastor, whether just being a community advocate, but how could I relate to these contexts that I was seeing on this movie, Snow on the Bluff? And the in the movie, Snow, who is the protagonist, who's a drug dealer, his child's mother, his baby mama, got shot and killed by a opposing gang, and his son was crying, was mourning the death of his mother, and he was telling the son, "Hey man, no, be strong. You can't cry. Be strong. Be strong. Be strong." So again, I want to go back to that important point you made, Rev Kev, about making definitions and being solid on how we define the words that we use, so that we don't define them in this way that we're not sure about, that is actually subconsciously toxic. Can you define strength for us, all of us? How do we define strength?
Do we want to define, like, what is strength for men, or are we working with kind of cisgenders, or just how do we define strength in general, right? Because I think it's such a specific conversation to have when we're talking about toxic masculinity, to then kind of have to define, like, what makes a man, or what makes a man a strong man, without being toxic, or without even being too extremely tied to the kind of genderized ways of thinking.
You make a good point.
I think it
I
goes
guess
back
how
to
how how do we define that for men?
Oh, well, I was thinking that it goes back to what Rev Kev said, that it's hard to define something without putting a whole group of people in one category and making them live out this particular way of living things. And so, if the question would have been maybe how do we want men, or how do we want um how would we respond to strong in our life, or what makes strong make us feel comfortable with someone being strong in our present. I think being more personal, saying I in that situation, because it goes back to our pastoral lens, taking responsibility of our definition, because people, someone can look at something being racist and think it's not racist, but it's because of their experience and their lived experience. So I believe it's the same thing with this word of being strong. And so for me, a male that is a strong male is to recognize his weakness, and then to live it out. If you know that you are overweight, if he knows he's overweight and he's working to get better and get healthy, to me that is strength in making himself better. And that's the same thing if I'm looking at a woman. If a woman realizes she has high blood pressure, or she's in a bad relationship and she gets out, to me that is the definition of strength, that I'm being strong in that way.
And I think that this could go for both ways. But when I think about strength in this instance, because like what you were saying kind of went to like this emotional degree, and I think like bringing up the snow and the bluff, and then I think that it gets kind of difficult because there is this level of having to speak to your emotions, but then also there's this dual consciousness of this is what we're supposed to do, but this is the ideology that most of people experience on the day. So you still have to navigate through that. So like knowing how to navigate in safe ways, but being self-aware is a big part. Knowing how to display healthy vulnerability. It don't mean that you just open like a bridge and everybody walking over you and stuff like that. And it don't mean that you got a wall. It's more like a drawbridge. You know when to allow people in, or you can discern through that. But then at the same time, you don't feel bad when you have to put up boundaries, right? Like, so there's this healthy sense of vulnerability. Like you were saying, Mashakadi, there's a level of accountability. Like, so you need to be able to say when you are wrong, and this is accountability and vulnerability. You can't be so self-reliant that you don't know how to ask for help from the right people. Like, don't just be getting help, or you know what I'm saying? Like, you just taking whatever. It's okay to try to do things yourself, but if it's out of your wheelhouse, there's nothing wrong with allowing somebody who is better than you or more equipped than you to take the lead. Because a lot of time we won't allow our women or people in our lives who are equipped to do the job because we the boss. Like, come on, bro. Let's be efficient, boss. You know what I'm saying?
That goes back
let,
to the church, Kevin. That is all in the church. That's all in the academy, where we know that our women are good with coordinating, or some women are good with coordinating and bringing people together and drawing people together and being that nurturing body. But a lot of our men believe that's the only place they are, and they shouldn't come in their lane in a sense. But that's all in the church, in the academy, all in there.
I totally agree, and you both of y'all made some really good points. For me, I define strength in a healthy way. I define it. Um, it's a willingness to face one's truth and to assume the responsibility to seek wholeness. So you it takes strength to really look in the mirror and face your truth, whatever that is. I think your willingness to face your truth, I think that is masculine. Um, is to be able to stand in the mirror and say, this is who I am, or these are my gifts, or these are my growth opportunities. This is where I can grow in these certain areas. And I then think it also takes strength to assume the responsibility to seek wholeness, to say, hey, I'm having some issues with my mental well-being. So I need to seek a counselor to get to a place of mental and emotional wholeness. Or, hey, I need to seek the advice of someone in finance to get my credit together. Or maybe I need to seek a marriage counselor because I'm having some difficulties with my spouse. I think it takes strength to be able to face your own truth, and then to assume the responsibility to do something about it, to be whole. That for me, that is strength, no matter even in all cases, but especially in the case of Baby Boy. I think the how he may have defined manhood and strength. I don't see that as true strength. I see that as more what weakened him. He was more focused on the butter, like Mel was was talking about. I think he was more focused on the wrong things, which was weakening his personhood.
One of the things. Oh, go ahead, Mashakati.
I would say in our last 10 minutes, I was going to try to bring in the women that was in Baby Boy and how they embody the toxic relationships, and how the women in our lives, or the women, black or white or other, it doesn't matter, how we embody the toxic relationships or the toxic masculinity, and then we live it out as though this is normal and this is the way it's supposed to be. What are your thoughts about the women in this movie living out this toxicness?
Yeah. Go ahead, Littlefield.
I feel like even just before this, when the question was about how we define strength, in my mind, I kept thinking about how do we define masculinity? And I can definitely jump out there, and I think I definitely see this in the movie. There is a way in which, right, we obviously like want to get away from toxic masculinity, or as a woman, you don't want toxic masculinity, but it's very hard to define what a strong cisgender male is without the connection to toxic masculinity. I think it's very hard to kind of separate the two. And so there's a kind of degree in which, even something I think you can see in the movie, where some women, and I'm not necessarily excluding myself, I guess, there is a degree to which you want a sort of idea of something, just minus the part that harms you personally, right? And that doesn't really work, right? That kind of never really works. You can't like want this person to be this sort of hyper masculine or strong male, but then you kind of don't want it to have this negative effect on you. And I think it's sort of a generational thing. And I see it with men my age and younger as well, where they don't necessarily want to be the type of men that the older men they know were, but they also don't really know what kind of men they want to be. And then you got kind of Black women here who are like, I don't want that kind of man, but I've never seen the kind of man that I think I want. I don't know that person. I don't know how to interact with that person because I've never experienced that person. And the kind of added thing that you yourself as a Black woman have really been taught, either by a person specifically or just by life experience, that actually it doesn't matter if men are strong because you still have to be. So like, and I just recall even in Baby Boy, there's a scene where he tells her that the reason why he wanted her to have his baby is because he knew if he died that the baby would always be there to carry his life on. And she says, well, if you're dead and this baby is here, well, what does that leave me? And he says, oh, you'll be all right. And he says that about 3 times in the movie. At the beginning of the movie, when the mother asks him, how is Yvette? And he says, oh, she'll be all right, when they've left the abortion clinic. So there's this kind of idea that like the women are supposed to be strong for them. Right. So I think, I don't know, I see that as some part of the kind of toxic codependence, right? The kind of toxic codependence, because as long as I'm being strong and I have this sense that I'm actually the one who has to keep it together and be strong for the kids and for the whole Black community and all Black people all across the world, right? If I'm the one that's supposed to do that as the Black woman and the Black mother, it kind of feeds more into this sense of entitlement that these kind of underdeveloped young men have, that like, you are my mama and I am supposed to be able to depend on you. You are supposed to do it all. See, haven't you been doing it all? And I see that with Yvette and even with the mother.
Yeah, and it, like with what you're saying, like there's a quote that people, I don't know who coined this term, but it was, we raise our daughters but we love our sons. And even like how you depicted the beginning of this movie and how things are going on, like this is baby boy, we know that he stay with his mama, but all the scenes he ain't never really at his house, but he's displaying like he runs somebody's house, whether it's his mama house, whether it's his girl house, whether it's his other baby mama house. Like he's like the man, but he still want to be loved on like baby boy, like, mom, how you gonna do me? But mama need a life too, Jody. Another quote alert.
And, and even, I'm sorry, even when one of my favorite lines, which is really random because it's a random line, but it's when Yvette is laying on the couch talking to her friend and she says, Jody, my Jody. He just wanted it, but the way she says it, it's like he's her actual baby. She just says, Jody, my Jody, like he's a little baby.
And to like what you're saying, like what you were saying earlier, like what do we do when our women take up this mantle, because like you have to, like there's no choice, and we know what healing language sounds like, but like you said, it's, I don't know how to actually be in a healed situation. And so as a man, if I'm trying to talk to you or deal with women in various settings, it's like, but you said these things, but when I tried to assimilate to those things or grow to those things, nobody could deal with me. So do I stay here type of thing? Is it, do I just go back to being a dog because it's not healthy, but I feel like I'm in control because I'm not the one who is vulnerable getting hurt. I'm the one who just is causing, inflicting the pain. So like there's this level of toxic masculinity being displayed. And then when we talk about what healing looks like, we are a lot of times aren't in the spaces to actually receive that healing because we still know what the reality around our corner or in our families, at the school, at the church is like. And so we are dealt wrestling with that dual consciousness. Like, is this something, is it worth me doing this ongoing work type of thing?
I think I got a definition now of strength that helped me. Thank you, Kev. I think one of the kind of paramounts of strength for me is the ability, having like the wherewithal, and I guess the strength, right, to do what you need to do or what you think is right or what has to be done, even before people know it's what has to be done or before people appreciate that it's what has to be done. I think I see a lot of Black women doing that to a degree that is harmful to their own sense of self. And I often see a lot of young Black men, and I ain't gonna even just say young because I'm 38, and it's not like it's, I don't think much different at this age or even older than me. Right, men who maybe want to kind of shy away from, like, I don't have to do things that aren't being praised, that I'm not going to get a sort of tangible and immediate reward for, or that people aren't going to think is cool, or that doesn't affirm my sense of entitlement and my sense of manhood, right? If it doesn't do that, then I don't have to do it, or I shouldn't have to do it. It's for you to do, right? You should.
All right, so I am enjoying the conversation, but we are at our last minute, y'all. We are in our last minute, and so as a closing question, as you hear my crying baby in the background, who is your favorite character and why?
I guess I'll say I mean, that it's probably Jody because there's so much to learn from his growth. So I guess it's a cliche answer that it would be Jody, but I guess really he's my favorite character.
Well, I'm gonna go. I have to go with Yvette. I mean, I absolutely have to go with Yvette. I feel like this movie would have been half the movie it was, not only without that character of Yvette, but also without Taraji P Henson playing that character. It's just phenomenal, and it adds so much to the truth and the richness of and the comedy of the whole movie. For me, it's definitely Yvette. I stole my car, Jody. Absolutely.
I'm a cook. I'm a clean. I'm a hold it down. I think my favorite person in this movie now would be Peanut. Um, and the reason why, like watching this film at first, I used to like hate his character, but that was because he was in Smart Guy before this film. So you went from being like this goofy kid in high school, like silly, and then you just show back up on screen and you big gangster. You are the pressure, and I was just like, come on, you ain't a gangster. And so I like his character because he really did transform like the acting in that, and then the dialogue that they're having in the garage where he's fixing the bike and he's talking about how he got to get his soul saved because he don't want to go to heaven, and Jesus like, man, turn around. Like, if you watch these blockbuster films as many times as many people have, you already know what scene we're at, and that scene right there, I was like, yeah. So Peanut for me.
So I want to thank you guys, but before I close, my favorite character now today is actually Jodie's mom because she had to push him out regardless, and she had to realize she had to have a life. Baby boy, I raised you. You did what you did and lived the life. Now I need to live my life. So Jodie's mom, what was her name? I can't think of her name. But she's one of my favorite characters today. She wasn't then, but she is now. It might be because where I am in my life. But I want to thank each one of you for coming on and having this conversation. Just to let you know, we do this every second Friday. And so if you want to come back, you are welcome to come back. Share it, tell a friend. If you have a topic that you want to bring to the table, bring it to the table. We are Black Voices Matter. And so that's art, that's religion, that's in the classroom, academics, it doesn't matter. Black voices matter. We want to bring it to the table so that people know that our voices matter. Not just that we matter, but our voices and our arts and our education has made a difference, is making a difference in today's life. So I want to thank you. I want to thank Gammon. I want to thank all of y'all for just being a part of this movement.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. And Rev Kev, did you want to, because you have so much going on, we're even co-facilitating a book club. So I wanted to give you, let you do the honor of even inviting us to, or inviting our audience to even our book club.
All right. So if you want to check out the How to Be an Anti-Racist book club, we do those on Thursdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Eastern Standard Time. You can catch us on Facebook Live. So just jump on and continue like to do the work of understanding how to be an anti-racist. Before we get out of here, we also want to say it's Women's History Month. So we want to thank Professor Littlefield over at Russ College. We want to thank Mashakati McKenzie for what y'all doing, like phenomenal conversations. And then since this is, a theological thing, and we're talking about toxic masculinity, there's a scripture that kind of like sums this movie on what we need to be doing and how to dismantle toxic masculinity. And there's a couple, but I'll stick with 1 Corinthians 13:11. When I was a child, I used to speak like a child, think like a child, reason like a child. When I became an adult, let's use inclusive language. When I became an adult, I put away childish things. Let's continue to do the work of dismantling toxic masculinity by understanding ourselves so that we can continue to do the work of growing and healing. ourselves and our community. So we are doing no harm.
Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Black Lives Matter. And we hope that you join us next second Friday right here on the Gammon Theological Seminary Facebook page. Peace.